Good day and welcome to today's webinar. This webinar is being recorded. If you have a question at any time, please enter it into the Q&A panel. This time, I'd like to turn the call over to Leila Hauser. Go ahead, Leila.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar today on Proving PR's ROI, Communicating Results with Senior Leaders. My name is Leila Hauser, and it's my privilege to introduce you to today's speakers. First up, we have Chris Brusca. Chris is a LexisNexis veteran and has been with the company since 1996. He is a business information expert and has spent his 22 years with the company working with a range of for-profit and not-for-profit organizations. Today, Chris is going to speak about crafting a measurement dashboard that proves PR impact, sharing compelling insights that make you a strategic partner, not just a cost center, and he will provide an overview of tools to provide reporting and analytics to show ROI. Next up, we'll have Sean Cleveland. Sean is one of our resident media intelligence experts at LexisNexis. He has worked in various marketing capacities for the last 4 years and has developed a passion for helping companies achieve business goals through marketing communications. Sean's focus is on earned media with an emphasis on campaign optimization, external communications, and analyzing the ROI earned media has on business and communication goals. Sean is going to speak to us today about measuring results with social analytics, making business decisions based on social insights, as well as what to show senior leaders that will answer their tough questions. And then last but not least, we have Chris Scully, who is a senior media analyst with 15 years experience with media measurement and evaluation. He works directly with clients to design, set up, and deliver customized media analysis solutions, which includes leading projects for Dick's Sporting Goods, Care International, Fifth Third Bank, and many others. Chris holds a degree in political science and has also served on President Bill Clinton's White House staff in the Office of Presidential Letters and Messages. There, he drafted and edited President Clinton's correspondence with state and local elected officials, as well as other prominent dignitaries on topics such as education, transportation, foreign affairs, and social security. So Chris is going to speak to us about showing ROI for media performance and how you can do that by correlating communication data with the business data and goals. So with that, I am going to pass over to Chris Brusca, who will get us started.
Thank you, Leila, for the warm introduction. I appreciate it, and thanks, everyone, for your time this morning, wherever you might be calling in from. So what is ROI? ROI traditionally is defined as a ratio that measures profitability based on the result of dividing net profits by net worth, and the higher the number, the better. It's also referred to as a positive contribution to the bottom line. So pretty simple, right? Not necessarily, not for PR. Everyone wants to attach value to everything, obviously, and use that information to determine if we're all contributing to a company's bottom line. And ideally, demonstrating value is what we all want to show we're doing, but it's not so cut and dry in our world. So the ROI Conundrum. As PR professionals, we face many challenges with regards to quantifying and measuring and then reporting that information to senior leadership, so that it shows our efforts are paying off and or moving the needle, so to speak. Even if we know our efforts are doing that, what we really need to do is show it. So some of the challenges in this area include the challenge of PR ROI being measurable and reportable. Results are often desired. Information needing to measure ROI is not always immediate, accurate, or easy to obtain. It's a moving target. ROI means different things to different people. And as you know, in the world of PR, we're asked to do offense and defense. So PR compared to marketing, which a lot of times those are often being compared, marketing activities are very often offensive, involving offensive tactics, which are mostly geared towards sales generation, which in many cases is a little bit easier to quantify and measure, whereas PR activities are both offensive and defensive. So the challenge becomes, how do you measure things like avoiding tarnished reputation or losing sales or something related to shareholder value due to a negative news story? And also, PR budgets generally are a little bit smaller than marketing budgets. So what the best thing to do would be is to gain agreement and really dig in on what ROI means to senior leadership. As I said earlier, ROI means different things to different people, so it's best to discuss this topic and make sure that you're on the same page and that you're in lockstep with one another. So things like understanding is ROI a financial number? Does that mean sales dollars, growth, stock price, market share? Is it limiting reputational damage from a crisis? And if so, how will you quantify what minimized damage is or getting ahead of negative news? Is it simply just creating awareness more efficiently? How are you going to quantify that? What does an uptick in awareness look like? What does that mean? Is it more positive news coverage and less negative coverage? Is it more coverage overall, or is it more coverage by more influential outlets versus less influential outlets? So the key would be really understanding and being on the same page with your key stakeholders and senior leadership on what that is so that you know the best way to report that so that you're on the same page. So once you've agreed with senior leadership on what it is, gain further agreement on how you will measure and report it. And that involves discussing the measurements and the tools that are available to do so. Part of that is discussing, frankly, what is realistic and what is not realistic to measure and report based on those definitions discussed. So sometimes certain leadership might think that certain reports or certain type of information is available, and really understanding what your joint definitions are in lockstep might really go a long way in making sure that what you're reporting is what they understand and that you don't have any issues down the road. If you need internal information, information internal to the company that's not easily gained, make sure that you have a secure agreement on how you're going to get that information and what that information is going to be. Things like sales figures, subscription rates, enrollment rates, things that aren't necessarily always public. You need to make sure that you have that so that you can take that into consideration with all of the other types of information that you report. And obviously, we want to discuss our timelines and our delivery methods with senior leadership on how we're going to put that information out to them. And then lastly, we need to align budgets for the proper tools that we need to get and the personnel that we need to obtain for the process that we need to undertake for the reporting and measurement. There's two types of primary reporting that I'd like to discuss. So when it comes to the actual analysis and reporting, you have people and you have machines with artificial intelligence. With people, which I call here human curated analysis, there's really no substitute for a person reading and interpreting information, and when possible, that's obviously, I think we all might agree that that's probably the best route to take. It often produces the most accurate and robust results. But there are trade-offs. It takes more time and takes more advanced planning, and it's not always convenient or possible. And the second way would be automated analysis. So readily available analysis found in media monitoring tools. It can provide you quick and effective results when parameters are set up properly. It's relatively low cost. The trade-offs, however, are sometimes there's a reputation on some of the automated reporting tools that there are vanity metrics in there that aren't necessarily very useful or are inconsistent and not as accurate as human curated analysis. Now, keep in mind that what some would be considered to be vanity metrics can definitely have some value if properly set up. In a lot of vanity metrics, things like share of voice or reach or media values have clearly been discussed, and they're very controversial at times. However, most media monitoring tools, especially like LexisNexis News Desk, allow you to actually really hone your searches in so that the data that you do pull out of that is very relevant and on point so that your analysis is as sound as it can possibly be. So what I'd like to do is show you a few examples here of some reports that I've been able to pull out of the LexisNexis News Desk tool, and I'm going to use I'm going to use a couple different examples. I'm going to start off with this report. This is a coverage over time report. So let's say you work for Nissan and you're working hard to increase media publicity and brand awareness around your electric car, the Leaf. Clearly, the big player in this market is Tesla, And in April, you rolled out some key information about your new autonomous driving system, and for a while you had some really good coverage. But now it's late May, and you've noticed that Tesla has stepped up its efforts. So you put a plan together and remind everyone what the Leaf is all about. So you can see here a spike in increased coverage, and this is a really good measure to get an idea of the kind of impact that you're having when you put more information out that could be relevant in the press. Reach over time. Continuing with this example above, you can see coverage over time, but with actual reach numbers incorporated. And reach numbers include statistics on unique monthly visitors to news outlets, as well as readership for traditional print outlets. Reach gives you a sense for the size of the audience that could potentially be exposed to your media outreach. And you can see in this example that even though Nissan's getting good overall coverage over time, as seen on the previous slide, their reach isn't quite keeping up. This can indicate they're not getting enough exposure in top-tier or enough influential media outlets. Media value, as I said earlier, AVE's media value, those generally are relatively controversial numbers, but I think we all know that some clients, especially senior leadership, does like to see this information. And so here's an example of a media value report. So that, let's say I'm Nissan, and knowing that Tesla dominates the electric car market coverage at this point, I wanted to remove them and BMW just to see how I'm building awareness in relation to other similarly priced and marketed cars from Chevy, Hyundai, and Kia in this example. You can see that my media value as Nissan far surpasses all others for most of the time frames above, which covers 90 days. But worth noting and investigating would be the increase in value and coverage from Nissan's competitors, or my competitors rather, in late April and parts of June. And with this information, I could dig in a little bit and see exactly what happened during these time frames. Also, share of voice. Share of voice is a really good measure of coverage that shows you your share of voice in the market related to other key competitors, for example. In this example, I'm showing coverage from May of 2018 versus June of 2018, and you'll see that Nissan specifically, the share of voice has actually increased from May over June. However, you would expect that increase to be a lot greater because Tesla's decreased significantly. However, the gains have been made by Chevy, so this might be worth exploring a little bit to see what exactly did Chevrolet do to increase that share of voice during that time frame when I had an opportunity possibly to capitalize on the type of exposure that Tesla was not getting that I was receiving more of in June. And coverage by media type. So maybe I'd like to know where my coverage is appearing compared to my competitors and where there's an opportunity to grow my coverage. And this chart illustrates that my coverage on TV and radio is pretty solid, but I'm lagging on online news and in blogs. So depending on my strategy, I might want to make some adjustments. Note that for the purposes of this example, I did not include social media, but you can see that we do cover broadcast. You can see a breakdown of your online news versus blogs, print, as well as how often you're mentioned and how often all these brands are mentioned in comment sections as well as forums, which, as all of you know, are becoming pretty popular. Next is MozRank, and so what this means is it's not really enough to know that I'm getting more coverage, for example, but am I getting coverage where it counts? So here I can see that while I'm doing pretty well as Nissan in overall coverage, I'm trailing behind other competitors in addition to Tesla in regards to sources that have a higher influencer rank, or what we call MozRank. MozRank is a measure of on a 10-point scale showing website linking authority or popularity of a given page on the internet, and it reflects the importance of a web page on the internet in relation to others. So the higher the number, the better, and in this case, Nissan might want to explore getting coverage in some of the higher ranking news sites that are out there. And lastly, we have sentiment. In this example, we're seeing sentiment, both positive, negative, and neutral related to news coverage regarding Tesla CEO Elon Musk. And Elon's in the news for all sorts of reasons. Many of you know who he is. He's relatively charismatic, and he's involved in just about everything. And you can see positive reviews about Elon generally outweigh negative news. And so over the course of a 90-day snapshot, you can see kind of spikes and lulls in both positive and negative coverage. For example, you'll note that during the week of June 18th, there was some negative press around a disgruntled ex-employee that broke into Tesla's computer systems and how Elon further handled it. The situation was quickly addressed and negative publicity waned, and positive publicity soon took over the following week, as you can see an uptick in positive coverage and less negative coverage as Elon received some rave reviews over the actions he took to hit some major manufacturing milestones related to their new Model 3, which had been very behind in manufacturing targets. So at this point, what I'd like to do is thank you for your attention thus far, and I would like to turn our presentation over to Sean Cleveland, who will continue our discussion. Sean? Hello, Sean? I think you might be muted, Sean.
Bear with us just a second while we work through these technical little mute situation here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Was they able to hear me before? Or was they talking to myself?
You were talking to yourself, but now we can hear you. So.
Very good. Well, thanks so much for the warm introduction, Chris. Thanks, everybody, for joining our webinar today. I'm very excited to speak with you, and I really appreciate your time. So today, for my portion, I'm going to be focusing, let me move the slides over here. I'm going to be focusing on how you can make business decisions based on social insights and what to show leaders to effectively communicate the value that you bring to strategic business objectives. So really it all starts, with a sound strategy. But before we jump into that, I also want to talk to you a little bit more, sort of around what the focus of my portion will be around more of a marketing-related aspect of PR. So because of the way that the digital landscape works and the tasks that are relegated to PR pros, we've really suddenly found ourselves in sort of a gargantuan shift where we're sort of deeply intertwined with the rest of the marketing mix. So with the rise of Google and direct-to-consumer distribution, where people can now get the content that they want on demand rather than needing to go through any specific outlet, PR has emerged as almost a stealth advertising function with the understanding that people are searching for what they want, and search engines will return results predicated around the keywords that our audience inputs. So now our messaging needs to be more targeted and strategic and aligned with our business goals than ever before. PR is going to be the most trusted form of advertising, and I hope nobody grills me for calling it advertising, but I am going to use that term for today because it is really well aligned with the digital landscape and environment and how that all works. The reason it's the most trusted form of advertising is because it isn't offensive. It doesn't feel as if you're being sold. Rather, you are learning new information. So if we take a step further and do the research, we can use things like persona-based messaging strategies, things that were typically well aligned with traditional marketing, to not just help people learn, but to also help drive their behavior, as well as help them enter sort of your world. Being that ultimately in digital, a typical customer journey is, once somebody hears about you, maybe it's via a search that they did and they saw some editorial, they'll check your website, and then they get pixeled. And then you start dishing them automated content that hopefully is unified with the original storytelling that brought them in, which ultimately the goal is to create strong brand equity and alignment and move them further along the customer journey to a buying decision. So again, where exactly does the communicator fit in this, and how do we tell that story? Well, again, it's all going to really start with strategy. any sort of successful PR or comms campaign should be established using, either the following methodology or something similar. This isn't gospel. It can be changed. It can be altered. Things can be moved around. But in general, this is a pretty sound framework for creating a compelling campaign. So first, it's going to start with a business objective. So what is the business trying to do? For the purpose of today, again, looking at this with more of a marketing veil, we'll be focusing on making money, driving sales, revenue goals. So how can we contribute? So, what actions and efforts can we undertake in the PR comms function that will move the needle and be facilitative of this goal? I really want to focus on research. This part is so crucial. Research is what is going to define our strategy. It will ensure that external communication is specifically targeted to publics who want, need, or care about the information that we're distributing. So without such research, PR is based on experience or instinct, neither of which play large roles in strategic management. Research is what you need to do to tie strategy to the desired overarching business goal by looking at past outcomes so that you can more intelligently craft your strategy in a way that will replicate the outcomes that you want. So now that you've done the research, you know what metrics you need to move in order to accomplish your goal, and you know how to move them. You know how they will facilitate the overarching objective as well. So now it's time to lay out the end-user activities that will move those needles and create dashboards that will allow you to track your progress. Finally, it's go, 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 carry out your strategy. Enough with the measurement and the information gathering. It's time to do the activities that will actually move the needle. Finally, we need to measure and analyze. So we need to understand the outcomes, both reactive but also proactively. So you'll want to set up some dashboards so that you can understand in real time in case you need to make any in-game pivots or understanding that, hey, we're doing great and we can double down on our strategy. Also, you're going to use your analysis to aid in your report building and storytelling so that when it's time to report on outcomes, you can use your analysis and storytelling abilities to create a compelling report around the impact of your efforts, not just on your PR objectives, but more importantly on the overarching business objectives. So now, because we are kind of focusing on this from more of a PR marketing perspective, let's take a quick look at the marketing funnel. So as PR and communication pros, you are here. You're at the top line awareness line item of the marketing funnel. Now, we need to get here. So in order to do that, we need to know sort of what's happened in between. So if we want to take a customer from being aware of us to ultimately converting, and more importantly, being able to sort of tell that story to the powers that be, we need to be able to tell the story around how our awareness efforts have downstream to that bottom line impact. And it's relatively impossible to connect those 2 points without also understanding what has happened between this point and this point here, the top point and the bottom points that I've outlined for you. So before we go further there, let's go ahead and start with the basics. So, what are we really responsible for? As communication professionals, we're typically in the business of creating awareness. So, of course, there is some crossover with paid media, but typically we're going to be tasked with creating awareness through generating earned media. So what is earned media? At a high level, it is content that's about you that's not coming directly from you. So this can be in the form of ratings and reviews, editorial, word of mouth, digital chatter, and influencers, to name just a few. And essentially, we are leveraging a third party to transmit our message to their trusted, established channel to reach our mutual audience and drive behavior the way that we want it to go. So what are some of these channels that we're typically going to go through? We have our traditional print news, magazines, trade publications, broadcast networks. Online news it's an argument that many people have, could likely be grouped here as well. But there's absolutely going to be crossover there with digital. So in the digital realm, there are things like online news, ratings and review sites, forums, blogs, etc. On social, of course, you have all of your major social publishers, your Facebook, your Twitter, your Instagram, just to name a few. Obviously, there are many more. So ultimately, our customer must be aware that something exists in order for a purchase to be made. And in addition to this basic awareness, there's a certain perception that we should seek to create that's well-aligned and facilitative of our objectives. So through our research, we should know that in order to accomplish our objectives, we need to use specific messaging that will resonate with a specific audience that can be reached through a specific channel, one of the ones that I've just listed, and perhaps also in a specific geography or market, for example. So what are some metrics that we can set up for our analysis and our dashboards that can help to tell that awareness story and track our awareness goals? So here are some metrics that I want us to consider. Essentially, you need these to communicate effectively that you are carrying out the strategy that you have laid forth, with the understanding that a successful execution of that strategy can lead to the desired business impact. So essentially, these are going to be metrics that can help you tell that story, but they cannot stand on their own. You can't just show somebody a chart, a graph, a hockey puck, and have that tell the story. You really need to be able to tie the change over time that you see in these metrics to the research that you did on the front end. So in that sense, the story could go a little something like this. Here is what I did. Here is why I did it. Here's how it drove a change in these metrics over time. And the type of change that we saw over time in these metrics proves that our strategy was successful in creating more awareness to the right people with the right message. So for example, things like reach and media value trends over time, those can be great measures that you have increased the opportunity to see. So they're good for measuring trends around, hey, are we doing what we need to do to make more people aware? And I know that these are very controversial metrics. A lot of people are going to call them vanity metrics. I tend to not really like that term because there is value to them if you are able to connect them, again, to not just your objectives, but also the strategic overarching business objective. And that metric standing alone by itself might look like a vanity metric, but if you know how to speak around it and tell the right type of story to the internal stakeholders and powers that be, it all of a sudden becomes much more than just a vanity metric because you have a standard of measure. So essentially what that means is that, if we can quantify that X equals 1 and Y equals 2, and we know what X and Y is, and we know that if we do this and that, we can get more of X and Y, and more of X and Y means more awareness, then it is perfectly suitable for any type of trend analysis that you need to do. And again, it's not really necessarily going to tell you definitively that you created more probability to see your message, but it will absolutely tell us that we are creating more opportunity to see the message and that these key awareness metrics are trending up. So key message pull-through and share of voice are two metrics that will help to confirm that the desired message did come through. Engagement, that will prove that the probability to see the message has also increased. More importantly, it will prove that the awareness is real. Now you can take it a step further and, for example, run a demographical analysis on the individuals who are engaging with your content. So say you have an online news story that is shared over, maybe it gets picked up in the blogosphere, which then gets shared over to social, and a bunch of people have engaged with it. Now we can run a demographical analysis on those engagers to confirm that we're reaching the right people in the right market. So again, now using these metrics, we can tell our awareness story. We are creating more awareness. It's the right awareness. It's to the right people. The key message that we wanted to convey is coming through in our messaging. So now that we've done that, how do we connect all this to the strategic business objective? Well, here's one way that we can do that. So one of the things that we know is that, generally speaking, for a sale to occur, a customer must interact with one of our organic channels, which I like to call our owned assets. So this can be things like a website, a branded social channel, can even be a brick and mortar location. It can be metrics such as in-store traffic, website traffic, follower counts, and engagement on branded social pages. So for example, I used to work in retail. We had lasers on the door, so we knew how many people came in, we knew how many people made a purchase. That's how we knew our conversion rates in store and how well our salespeople were doing. But more importantly, if you know how many people in a certain store that's in a certain geography are going into the store, and perhaps you're running a bunch of paid advertising in that market, you're also running and previously you haven't been running a bunch of editorial, and now you do a big PR push with the goal of increasing sales. Well, now we can look and we can see, hey, does 1 + 1 = 2? Does it equal 10? Are we seeing a meaningful change over time in the traffic to that store? And so that's something where, very likely, if any of you in the audience, are B2C and have retail locations, very likely you guys have a way to measure how many people are in the store and are coming into the store, what kind of foot traffic it's getting. And you probably also have all of that data living somewhere in an Excel spreadsheet that can be integrated and commingled, with your sort of awareness metrics so that we can track the interaction with these owned organic assets. So now moving along further, what's going to lead to interaction with those owned assets? It's awareness. That is us. So therefore, in order to connect our efforts to business impact, we must first use our PR metrics to establish, hey, we are making more people aware. Then, using data from these organic assets and owned assets, we need to demonstrate that the increased awareness is leading to increased interaction with these assets. So we're making more people aware. It's leading to more people coming into our stores, more people visiting our website, more people following us and engaging with us on social. Finally, we simply need to then take a look at the sales data over that time period to prove that the increased interaction has led to an increase in sales. So using that framework, you can essentially do an overlay and not only tell the story around the success of your efforts as per your strategy and your PR metrics, but you can also tell the story of the customer journey from end to end, from top-line awareness that we've created through our efforts all the way through to bottom-line impact. This can be absolutely crucial in justifying budgets, increased investment in top-line funnel-generating activities. It helps us speak in a language that the C-suite can actually understand. And ultimately, this takes a combination of data, visuals, and storytelling. None of this can stand on its own. So my hope for today is that my presentation will hopefully help you to not only be excellent external communicators, but to be equally successful in telling your story to internal stakeholders and the powers that be. So real quick, I'm going to actually go through a couple of these metrics for you guys. Here's just a couple that I've prepared. And again, this is sort of around, again, tying that top-line awareness that you're creating and the type of awareness that you're creating to either bottom-line impact or connecting it to interaction with those organic assets. Ultimately, you want to have the three. So you want to be listening to everything that's being said out there in the wild. You want to be directly plugging in and integrating data from those organic owned assets to see how it's downstreaming to, all that chatter in the wild is downstreaming to interaction with those assets, and then plugging in data around business objectives like retention rates, marketing leads, sales, financial data like stock prices and trading volume to actually understand sort of that full journey from top to bottom. So the one that I have here, this is your retention rate versus social sentiment. So the beauty of a listening platform and being able to monitor and pull in all of this chatter from out in the wild, and then to be able to dice it down and analyze sort of the tonality of all of that sort of conversation and chatter, it's going to present new and interesting and insightful, meaningful ways to communicate the value of your efforts and some of these strategic business objectives. So for example, perhaps sales are down, and it's because our retention rates are declining, and we've established that, a key driver of that is there's a lot of negative and chatter and tonality about us out there in the wild. So as PR pros, we can put forth strategies designed to improve our tonality so that we can say, hey, look at our net sentiment 3 months ago was here, it was super negative. 3 months later at the end of this campaign, it's super positive. So we've moved the needle in the way that we've identified could help us impact those strategic business objectives. And then we're going to bring that data in to actually see, hey, did this change that we saw in our PR objectives and our PR metrics also lead to the desired business impact? Here's another one. So looking at stock price versus negative mentions. Stock price is interesting. I actually prefer looking at trading volume. I think it's a more useful measure just to be able to sort of do trend analysis around volume of chatter and how that could downstream to trading volume if you're a publicly traded organization. You know, you'll see things like the cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin. I mean, that stuff absolutely tracked with what was being said about it out there in the wild and online in terms of the trading that was being done. You know, if you see a big spike in digital chatter and then a corresponding spike in trading volume, then perhaps we'll want to do an audit on that spike we saw in chatter to see what was the context, the content, what were people saying and talking about. Because it's one of those things, if something is measurable and quantifiable, it could very well become engineerable. And again, with everything that we've talked about thus far, you know, we can absolutely use, you know, persona-based messaging strategies and you know, targeted messaging for a targeted effect and impact for a specific goal that we have in mind, knowing historically what the drivers have been. Here's a few other ones. Here's PR spend versus social reach. Again, your reach trends over time are going to be a great measure that you are increasing awareness and you're being successful in those efforts. So if your goal as a PR and communications pro is to increase awareness, we'll probably want to be able to tie the investment in the PR efforts and department to that awareness line item that we're creating. So, hey, this is what we're tasked to do. This is what our investments need to be tied to. Lead gen versus social mentions. So again, hey, there's all this chatter out in the wild. You know, perhaps I want to first see if that's leading to an increased interaction with my social channels as well. So we might need a little bit more data here than just what we have here. But then again, that's going to be able to tell you, hey, there's all this chatter out there in the wild. More people are landing on these pages where we've got great calls to action that are leading people down a funnel. And now we're getting, you know, all of these leads that are coming in through this channel that weren't there before. So we can prove that we've had an impact on this. Sales versus campaign mentions, you know, just again, another way to be able to talk about, hey, we're looking at a trend over time. We have more mentions in this quarter than we had in the last quarter because of this campaign that we put forth. Hey, why are we trying to get more sort of content saturated out there in the wild? Typically, especially in digital, it's going to have revenue goals attached to it. So being able to connect those two things, you know, again, is going to be absolutely crucial. These are just some metrics around some web analytics. You know, it's absolutely crucial, again, that you can integrate all of that sort of organic owned asset data into these platforms so that you're bringing in all of the chatter to benchmark your own efforts, but then you're also able to report on how that's downstreaming to people landing on the website, for example. Go through a couple of these. So that just about wraps up my presentation. I wanted to leave you all with some food for thought. This is something I've always struggled with, and it's something that I would love to get your input on. And so ultimately, if it is our goal as PR and communications professionals to create awareness, is it our responsibility to prove conversion? If more people are visiting our organic assets as a result of our PR and comms efforts, isn't it up to the folks that manage those organic assets to continue to push our prospects through the buyer's journey? And if those prospects convert into leads, isn't it up to the sales folks to close them? So perhaps being able to tell a more complete story around the customer journey, as I've just outlined, in order to point to our results and be able to say, that even in the face of key objective failure, so our key objective was more sales, and we didn't get that. But we were successful in our efforts in creating more awareness. We did what we needed to do, and the fix needs to be with our in-store promotions or calls to action on our website. Or maybe the leads, everyone's converting off the website that we're driving there, but they're not converting the sales. Maybe the fix is with the salespeople, but we did our job. So I do believe that the framework I've outlined for you and that I've taken you through should allow you to be more enabled in communicating this more effectively to the powers that be, and being able to say, hey, even if ultimately the business failed in its goals, I did the right thing. So you're protecting your job, your department, continued investment in top-line funnel ingestion, which again, being where that all starts, where the marketing funnel starts, it's absolutely crucial. So we as communicators need to be well-equipped in not only being excellent in our external communications, but also have excellence in our internal communications so that we can talk about and communicate our value to the powers at be in a way that makes sense, that the CFO can understand and get on board with. So this is going to go ahead and wrap up my portion of the presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment box. We'll look forward to answering them. I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to my colleague, Chris Scully, now.
Great. Thanks, Sean. Sean, you also need to pass control of the presentation.
Oh.
It looks like you have it, Chris.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, good day, everyone, and thanks, Sean, and thanks, Chris Brusca, for great presentations here. So today I'm going to talk about a little bit more practical steps to showing return on investment for media performance, and talk a little bit about some basic tangible steps that PR professionals can take, as well as a little bit more complicated approach to demonstrate ROI. So I'm going to begin with a basic approach and some tangible steps that any PR person can take to demonstrate that ROI. And it starts at the top. This process starts at the top, and where when you and your colleagues are figuring out how to approach your campaigns, your efforts, that the entire design process of your strategies and tactics should be designed around supporting your organization's overall objectives and goals. And then from there, what I recommend is that PR teams, set SMART goals in relation to these strategies and tactics. Specific goals that can be measured, that everyone agrees upon, that are realistic and are time-based. And from there, get buy-in with your management, get buy-in with your senior leadership. We're going to do these things to help our broader organization achieve, A, B, or C. Once that's all aligned, the next step is to put in place the process to track your progress in achieving these goals for your PR performance. We have at LexisNexis, we have tools like NewsDesk, which Chris Brusca showed a lot of data from LexisNexis Social Analytics, which some of the data Sean was sharing was from. Or we also offer human curated services that Chris Brusca mentioned through our LexisNexis Media Intelligence Research and Analytics team. So we have a comprehensive tools and approaches that can be used if you guys don't have the resources. And then the final step, and this is a little bit more difficult, but is to, in addition to tracking your own media performance, track how the organization is performing relative to those objectives and goals that the PR campaigns or efforts are designed to support. You want to see if there's any, if your progress on the PR side is coinciding with progress on the broader organizational results. So if you take this approach, you can provide some hard data demonstrating how your efforts have contributed to the bottom line of the organization and thus return on investment. So it could be really basic things like, your organization is trying to increase awareness, so the PR team can get together and say, we're going to use a Twitter campaign to double our number of followers over the next 6 months. 6 months to increase our brand awareness. And then just track how many followers you have each month and you know, report back that to the management in those terms. To increase awareness, you're seeking to increase sales, and the PR team and management decide that, you know, increasing attention in the local TV market will help improve sales, and you set a goal of at least, you know, increasing your amount of attention, say getting an average of at least 5 stories per month, and then track how well you do that, and then compare it to the sales results. You could, you know, if you're successful, you could say, you know, over the last 9 months, we've averaged 7 stories per month, and that has coincided with a 4% increase in sales. So just, you know, tracking those things over time and linking them back to that organizational goal or objective you're trying to help achieve is really effective and simple way to do it. A more sophisticated approach, though, or much more advanced approach, is to use statistical or correlation analysis. And it's just an extra layer, though it's a little bit more complicated than the methods I just talked about. But with this, you'd be looking at changes over time between your media performance and those organizational results to see if there's any strong statistical correlations between those changes. And so I'll walk a little bit through a case study on some data I've pulled together last year, looking at President Donald Trump's media attention and his public approval rating. So for a politician, any politician, his or her approval rating is a key important thing for them. If the public approves of, in a democracy, if the public approves of them, that gives them more power and influence and helps them affect the changes they want, the policy changes or otherwise, any other type of change that they want. The less the public approves of them, the harder it is for a politician to achieve his or her objectives. So for a politician or the President of the United States, his or her public approval rating is a key metric of his or her power. And so I wanted to look to see if there's any indication that President Trump's media attention early in his presidency had any linkage to his public approval ratings. So I did a study looking at top-tier U.S. media coverage, you know, media outlets like the Associated Press, New York Times, CNN, Fox News, USA Today, for the first 3 or 4 months of his presidency, so January 20th through early April of 2017. And then I pulled from 538, which is Nate Silver's website, for those of you who are familiar with him, daily public approval and disapproval ratings for President Trump. And then then examined the data, and I'm going to walk through some of the data points that I pulled out. So here it just shows the amount of attention President Trump received in those media outlets on a per-day basis, and this is all compiled through LexisNexis News Desk. Then here's the daily approval rating that I sourced from 538. And if you overlay the two, it's not a clear trend or anything like that. You can see generally both are going in the downward direction, but the pattern isn't really evident. So I just recast this data in a little different way and depicted his approval rating on the horizontal axis versus the approval rating on the vertical axis and the amount of attention he received on the horizontal axis. And I applied a trend line and then ran a correlation of those figures. Now, a statistical correlation is just a simple calculation. Well, it's not simple. A calculation that establishes the level, the association between how 2 independent variables change. Do they tend to go up together? If one goes up, does the other tend to go up? Or when it goes down, the other goes down? That would be called a positive correlation. Or do they change in inverse? So when one goes up, the other goes down, or vice versa. That's a negative correlation. And the possible ranges of values produced by this calculation are -1 to 1. And the farther you get from 0, the stronger the relationship is. The closer you are to 0, or if you are at 0, the less of an indication there is a relationship between those 2 variables. So in this case, in between the approval rating and the amount of attention you receive. So in statistical correlations, within that range, anything above the 0.5 to 0 or 0.5 to 1 range is considered strong, or -0.5 to -1 is strong. For this daily volume 2 approval rating, it's below that threshold, so it's not really that meaningful. So, so I tried recasting the data a little bit and compared the amount of attention President Trump received over 14-day periods versus how affected, after 2 weeks, how his public approval rating was, and just had a rolling basis. So if it was the 1st through the 14th of February, how was his public approval on the 15th of February? And then the next increment would be the 2nd through the 15th, and how was his approval on the 16th? So looking at this, it's a little bit more easier to look at and to tease out patterns. And then with the scattered chart, we can see that the trend line is a little bit, and the R value is above that threshold, and we're starting to get into a strong correlation. So there's a little bit more meaningful of a relationship there. And this just is statistical evidence that there is some sort of relationship that as his coverage went up, his public approval rating improved. Now, the one piece of data that I uncovered that had the strongest statistical correlation was when I compared the amount of attention President Trump received over a 14-day period to his disapproval rating. So how many people were unhappy with his presidency or disapproving of what he was doing. So with the scatter chart and the R value, we see here the relationship is a lot more strong than any of the 2 previous ones I shared. It's almost at a -0.9, so it's getting really close to the edge. And at essence, what this means is that as his coverage diminished, his media or his disapproval rating increased. So some of the takeaways that are that he did get a negative return on his investment, and that in particular he was hindered by his media attention. So some of the key takeaways to keep in mind, lessons or steps that you can take. The first thing is always keep in mind that to craft your strategies and tactics to support those organizational goals and objectives. Set smart goals for these strategies and tactics. Track your progress in achieving those goals, and then track them in relation to the overall organizational goals and objectives. And then, if possible, use correlation analysis to uncover if there's any that your media performance is contributing to your business or organizational results. So with that, I'm through, and now we can turn it over some questions, and we've gotten some on the, some people have typed in their questions, so if anyone else has questions, please feel free to add them in, and with that, we'll answer away the few that we've gotten so far.
No problem. I wanted to let you know we have a couple questions coming in, and you can still continue to ask your questions. One of the questions that we received was, how do you calculate the number of comments? I know that Chris Brusca had indicated wishing to respond to that.
Yeah, it was a good question, and essentially what the comments are include primarily comment sections from lots of blogs and certain news outlets that will allow you to comment or add some reviews to the bottom of news stories. So what we do when we accumulate comments is you're able to isolate a search that just searches within the comments of stories. We'll look for your keywords or whatever search criteria that you've included in your search, and it will just pull all of the stories or the actual comments from those stories so that you can kind of see what the chatter is and the buzz is within those sections. And it's a little different. It's not pulling anything from what you would traditionally consider social media, such as Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, but it's strictly comment sections from all blogs and news outlets that allow you to comment in their stories. And we tabulate all of that, and that is a kind of a unit of measure that we provide. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. We have a couple more, but just, again, we have a couple more minutes left if you want to continue entering your questions. But we did have specific questions from people regarding some of our services and the pricing for our suite of LexisNexis media intelligence and monitoring solutions. Since this depends on many variables, we'd love to discuss this further on an individual basis and have our team of experts follow up further. But I do want to remind everyone on this call that we do have a special pricing and offering of a free 2-month trial period, as well as a 20% off discount for new subscriptions for LexisNexis products to all of the WorldCom members. So make sure that you're aware of that when talking with the teams as well. All right. I know that there's specific questions regarding specific countries, and in regards to the Portuguese question, we do cover that language as well as many, many others as well. All right, if I see no other further questions, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. Be sure at the end of this, this webinar, we will have a survey available, so make sure to fill that out. And we will be following up with a recording of the webinar to all of you via email, so keep an eye out for that. If you have further questions, we'll provide our contact information to you in that email so you can be following up with those further questions. We appreciate your time and thank you so much for joining.